22mm socket, let's go ahead and remove the lug nuts and pull the wheel off. Sometimes the wheel might be stuck to the hub itself, so we're going to go ahead and using a rubber mallet, go ahead and just bonk the wheel and get that loose. Using a 10mm socket, we're going to go ahead and remove this slider pin bolt and this slider pin bolt. Now our caliper is stuck into the caliper bracket with some rust, so we're just going to give this a few taps and gently work that back and forth. You can see we got some mobility out of it already. All right, now that we have this released, I want to go ahead and hang this. Get that up out of the way. We just don't want any premature stress or pressure on the brake line hose. Now we're going to remove the brake pads. Using a 21mm socket and breaker bar, we're going to go ahead and loosen these two bolts. Before you remove this bolt, hold on to the bracket because it will fall once that bolt comes out. We're going to go ahead and remove the brake rotor. Set that aside. On the passenger side rear e-brake section here, we want to go ahead and get to this adjuster. You can see a little star wheel there. And we're going to go ahead and use a pry bar. We want to go ahead and try and loosen these pads. And pull this adjuster out. And we'll keep working this here until we can get this adjuster out from behind this spring. On this bottom spring here, I want to go ahead and try and tap the shoes inward. And this should release a lot of the tension on that spring. With that loose, you can probably use a pair of pliers, get on in there and remove that spring. So using a pry bar, we're going to go ahead and pull this shoe out a little bit. And right here, there is a retainer tab. Now it's locked in by using a pin that goes through the front of it. What we're going to do is use our pry bar. I'm going to pop this in here. And we're going to go ahead and tap that and pop that clip off. And we'll go ahead and pull that pin out through the back. Now I want to go ahead and repeat for the other side. So on the top side over here, there's a long spring that runs across the top. Go ahead, close up that spring as much as we can. I'm going to go ahead and pull that spring off. Once one side is free, we can now go ahead and open up the pads again. Grab that spring and work that out of the other side over here. You want to pay attention to the orientation of the spring. The longer part goes towards the rear of the vehicle, shorter part towards the front. All right, now on the back side of these two shoes is another spring that's connected on the back side. So what we're going to do is use a pry bar. I want to go ahead and loosen these pads. You can see that this is loosening up. And that spring is retracting that. Now our emergency brake control unit is sticking to the pad itself. So we want to go ahead and break the rust free from that and get that loose. Using a pry bar and a hammer, Just going to try and shock that a little bit. All right, now that that's loose, we're going to go ahead and pop the spring loose on the inside. So we're going to use a pry bar. I'm going to come right on the inside of that tab right here, and we're just going to tap that so that the spring comes dislodged. Once that spring is released from that rearward pad, go ahead and work this unit out. You can separate both pads. Go ahead and take our spring out. Once again, orient the longer part of the spring towards the rear of the vehicle. Now we have everything laid out exactly the way the things come off the vehicle. We have the two upper springs facing towards the rear. We have our caliper bracket bolts. We have our caliper slide pin bolts. We have our little spring locks here with the pins, our adjuster, and the lower spring. So let's go ahead and use your wire brush. You want to go ahead and clean everything up. When you're cleaning everything, you want to go ahead and do a visual inspection on everything. Make sure there's no points where everything is rusted and the parts are no longer usable. At that point there, you want to go ahead and replace the hardware as necessary. I'm going to go ahead and do this for all of the equipment. Now that we have everything cleaned up, let's go ahead and reassemble our wheel. Our adjuster wheel is going to get some grease. This is going to help keep moisture and stuff out of here and keep that e-brake working properly. Go ahead and get the adjuster wheel threaded on there. We're going to spin that right to the top. Put a little bit more grease on here. Slide that inside. I'm just going to wipe it down, keep it nice and clean. Now I want to go ahead and do a cleanup on the backing plate and everywhere that the shoes will be fitted to. So just going to use a wire brush, clean the e-brake setup. Now on the inside here behind your hub, there is going to be a gear unit. This is for your ABS. If you're cleaning all the rust and debris off of this, you want to make sure that no debris gets into these teeth. This is going to be something that is pretty important. So we're just going to go ahead, clean off any debris there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of grease on the spots where the brake shoes will be coming in contact. Usually they're identified by high points on the back of the backing plate. Now on the bottom side of the backing plate there is a rubber boot. I'm going to go ahead and pop this rubber boot out. This is going to be your adjuster window for the emergency brake pads once we get those installed. Pop that out through the back, set that aside. Now what we're going to do is install our rearward spring here, and this goes into the back right here. I want to go ahead and bring this over. We're going to feed the spring over the top of the axle here. While we're doing so, we're going to go ahead and feed this part of the shoe into the housing and the e-brake setup. Line that up. Slide that in like so. And then push that shoe in. I'm going to go ahead and take this spring here, feed this through, and want to get it through the notch on the back side over here. All right, once you got the spring hooked up, I'm going to go ahead and use your pry bar to go ahead and get the rearward pad lined up and onto the top e-brake setup here. And we're going to put one pin in through the back. You can see the pin coming through right down the bottom here. I'm going to go ahead and get our spring clip in there. Go ahead and use our small pry bar. I'm going to press in on those little tabs and work this down onto that pin. Snap that into place. I'm going to go ahead and get the upper outboard spring on. I'll make sure we get that lined up inside. All right, and we'll go ahead and pop that spring into place. Now we have the two upper springs installed. Now we're going to go ahead and put our adjuster in first. These notches here on each side have to go into the brake shoes themselves. Make sure that the adjuster is facing forward. We'll go ahead and line this up. Feed that in. Pop that into place. Next, we're going to take our spring and our tabs, our hooks right there, line that up. Now line this up with the other side as well. Get that side hooked. And we'll go ahead and work this other spring up into that hole there. Now we're going to go ahead and take the pin, feed that through on the other side. We'll feed our clip up through. And get that lined up. We'll use our pry bar. All right. Once that's popped on, just want to make sure that that's centered in there. I'm going to go ahead and give our brake shoes a bonk back and forth, make sure that they're centered and they're free. Install your brake rotor. So on the back side where we removed the rubber plug, I'm going to go ahead and use a screwdriver, and we're going to go ahead and adjust the star wheel on the e-brake. So what you want to do is turn this gear a couple turns. I'm going to go up front and turn the rotor and see if we can feel that grabbing. So on the front side, we're just going to grab the brake rotor and we're going to gently turn it left and right. And what we're actually listening for is just a slight bit of a drag of those pads just making contact with the rotor. I don't quite have it yet, so I'm going to turn that adjuster wheel a couple more times, or half a turn, and then I'm going to test this again. And I'm going to keep doing that until I can get that adjustment set. Once you have your e-brake adjusted, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the rubber boot in the adjuster window. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our caliper bracket. We did apply some blue Loctite on the threads. I'll go ahead and get that bolt started. And then we'll repeat for the bottom bolt. Let's go ahead and snug down these bolts for the caliper bracket. I'm going to go ahead and install our brake pads. Go ahead and line this up. And we'll go ahead and get our bolt started. Let's go ahead and snug down those caliper bolts. And we're going to torque the caliper bracket bolts to 100 foot-pounds. With those torqued, we're now going to go ahead reattach our clips right here for our ABS harness. And go ahead and install the wheel. And then get all these started by hand. Now we're going to go ahead and torque the wheels down to 135 foot-pounds.